Your brain is lying to you right now. You've heard it since you were a kid. You only use 10% of your brain. Scientists supposedly proved it. Einstein supposedly said it. Somewhere in the other 90%, the theory goes, lies untapped genius, psychic powers, photographic memory, abilities we've never unlocked. It's one of the most repeated facts in human history. And it's completely false, not exaggerated, not partially true, completely, measurably false. Today we're looking at how a myth this wrong survived for over a century, why so many smart people believed it, and what your brain is actually doing with that other 90% right now while you watch this video. Let's start with where this idea came from, because it didn't come from a lab. The most common origin traces back to a misquote. Psychologist William James once wrote that the average person rarely achieves more than a small percentage of their full mental potential. He was talking about motivation and untapped ambition, not brain tissue. Somewhere in translation, across decades of retelling, potential quietly turned into brain usage. A metaphor about ambition became a supposed fact about neuroscience. Then Einstein's name got attached to it. There's no record he ever said it. But nothing sells a myth like a genius's face next to it. By the 1900s, the claim had drifted so far from its origin that it started appearing in self-help books, psychic seminars, and eventually movies, presented as established science, with no citation in sight. So here's the question worth asking. If this were true, what would we expect to see? We'd expect brain scans to show most of the brain sitting dark and unused. We'd expect people with damage to 90% of their brain tissue to function completely normally. We'd expect evolution to have built an organ that burns 20% of your body's entire energy supply just to leave 9/10 of it idle. None of that holds up. Neuroscientist Beyerstein spent years compiling the actual evidence against this myth, publishing his findings in the research collection Mind Myths in 1999. His conclusion was blunt. There is no dormant, unused region of the brain waiting to be switched on. Brain imaging, PET scans, and fMRI shows activity distributed across virtually the entire brain, even during simple tasks. And across a full day, every region gets used. Here's the part that really seals it. Doctors have spent over a century studying what happens when specific parts of the brain are damaged, whether from stroke, tumor, or injury. If 90% of your brain were sitting empty and unused, damage to that 90% should do almost nothing. That's not what happens. Damage to virtually any region, no matter how small, produces some kind of measurable effect. Memory changes, movement changes, personality changes, speech changes. There is no safe region to lose. Every part is doing something. And there's a simpler argument that's easy to miss. Your brain makes up about 2% of your body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your total energy, even at rest. Evolution is ruthlessly efficient. Tissue that expensive does not survive natural selection sitting idle. If 90% of your brain were doing nothing, evolution would have shrunk it generations ago. The fact that we still carry the full organ at that energy cost is itself evidence that all of it is working. So why does this myth still feel true to so many people? Because the mistake isn't really about brain percentage. It's about how brain activity is often pictured in movies and media. A brain scan lighting up in one dramatic spot while the rest stays black, implying most of the organ is unused. In reality, functional scans are always showing relative activity, comparing one task to a baseline, not showing off versus on. Nothing in your brain is ever fully off while you're awake. The myth survives because the wrong image got stuck in people's heads, literally. Here's the twist that makes this even stranger. The real story of your brain isn't that 90% is unused. It's that different regions specialize. Sensory processing here, movement planning there, memory consolidation somewhere else, emotional regulation in another network entirely. At any given moment, you're not using 10% of your brain. You're using nearly all of it, just not all of it, for the same task at the same time. Neuroscientist Raichel's research on what's called the brain's default mode network even found that regions once assumed to go quiet during rest are actually highly active, just doing background work like memory consolidation and self-reflection instead of a specific external task. So the truth isn't less impressive than the myth. It's more impressive. You don't have a secret dormant 90% waiting for some untapped potential to unlock it, like a video game cheat code. You have an organ so efficient, so fully engaged, that evolution refused to let any part of it go to waste. You've heard it since you were a kid. You only use 10% of your brain, except you don't. You're using nearly all of it right now, reading this sentence. The blind spot was never in your brain. It was in the story you were told about it. If this opened your eyes, hit like. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Share it with the one friend who still swears this myth is true. And subscribe to The Blind Spot, because there's always something hiding just outside what you thought you knew. And next time, we find it together.